Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we return to another time travel episode. We're going back to 2015 once again, and we're visiting another popular and one of our favorite cartoon shows, Family Guy. Last time we talked about South Park, of course, and how they had a 2015 episode that seemed really relative to what's going on in the world now. And today, Family Guy has a similar setup. You see, back in 2015, a lot of similar things happened. There was a lot of riots and protests and arrests gone wrong that caused controversy, which is similar to what's happening right now this year. So now we're going to go back and see some of these cartoons that reflected on that and talk about how they're still very relevant today. For example, today's episode of Family Guy that we're going over, it goes over an interesting take on how the police react to certain kinds of crimes. We all know that if it's a white on black crime, they're going to be so crazy about it. The news reporters are going to show up. Everything's going to go nuts. It's going to turn into automatic racism, and the white guy is going to get derided and the black guy's a hero no matter what he did. We've seen this time and time again. And that's going to be expressed in this episode of Family Guy. There's a little joke here that we're going to go into specifically. But first, let's talk about the episode in general. Here is the wiki article. It's from an episode called A Shot in the Dark. And again, it came from 2015, around the same time that South Park episode came out, actually. And they're responding to a lot of similar things. As this article says, this was the 9th episode of the 14th season of Family Guy, and it aired on Fox December 15th. The episode was originally produced under the title Stand Your Brown, and a play on the Stand Your Ground law and Cleveland's last name Brown. In the episode inspired by the 2012 controversial death of Trayvon Martin, Peter joins a neighborhood watch group and is accused of being racist after shooting Cleveland Jr., an unarmed black teenager, in self-defense. So first of all, that's the first kind of reference, and that's from an older case, but it was still relevant in 2015, and actually it's still brought up now. Trayvon Martin is still something a lot of these protesters and other people have mentioned. We've seen videos and quotes where they bring up Trayvon Martin, and that's a whole other story. It came from 2012, and they're referencing the whole George Zimmerman thing, and again, that's another similar thing that South Park went over. They had a whole George Zimmerman episode too, which I guess we could get to here one day as well. If you guys want to review that South Park or more funny cartoon related episodes like this, make sure you like and comment that below. But for now, we're talking about Family Guy. And yeah, they have sort of gotten the same thing. Now, for first example, this is another example of how Family Guy's late. They're always really late. Their production cycle takes like a year to make an episode. And sometimes they reference older things, like this was 3 years prior to the episode. Now, that's not like too late in the real world. Like it's a couple years, but for them to do it, it's kind of lame. And it reminds me of a lot of other episodes we've seen of them where they're like a couple years behind South Park. Like they're always trailing behind because South Park is just really current. They make their episodes the week of, and they reference this like Trayvon Martin stuff that year. And then they also reference this stuff in 2015. So granted, Family Guy got on this in the right year. They reference a few other things, but really, actually, they're referencing Trayvon Martin from 3 years before. And it actually just was a coincidence that it landed and stuff happened in 2015 too, because as you can see by this next section, it talks about how this episode was delayed twice. First, there was attacks in Paris in November 2015, and then there was a shooting in San Bernardino in 2015. So the other incidents actually just were a coincidence. Really, this episode was going after the 2012 issue with Zimmerman and Martin, and that's the main premise. So there's actually that little backstory that kind of is funny and quirky. But the main point stands that this was a 2015 issue. It was talking about the police and their relation to these crimes and how they don't really cover the things properly in the media. The media kind of is the ones stoking the flames here. I think the police aren't as much to blame. They're just arresting people. And yeah, once in a while, they do have a bad arrest and there's bad cops out there who do bad things, but they typically get caught and arrested too, and then they get punished. So it isn't really like, oh, let's blame all the cops. Let's blame every single police officer. No, that's like a racist thing to say. I mean, not that cops are a race, but it's like generalizing over a group. So with that said, let's get into more of the plot here and see what else happens. Peter brings the Griffin family couch outside so that he, Quagmire, and Cleveland and Joe can take advantage of it to do their drinking. But when it is stolen, they decide to form a neighborhood watch. Peter manages to get the guy's guns to use when he spots a shadowy figure trying to get into Cleveland's house via the window. He shoots him in the arm to discover it's Cleveland Jr. So this is kind of the setup to compare it to a George Zimmerman thing. But the thing is, that case actually wasn't like that at all. It was like more about Trayvon attacking Zimmerman first. So they say that Trayvon Martin was unarmed, but there was a physical altercation. Like apparently Zimmerman might have followed him or something. He thought he was sketchy, and he kind of was being sketchy. Like he was walking around and at night or something, and in the neighborhood, he was in a neighborhood he'd never been to before. So that doesn't give him the right to attack. And then the reason there was a big altercation was they had a fight, and then Zimmerman had to defend himself, and that's why he got off and all the charges. They didn't have sufficient evidence. They couldn't convict Zimmerman because, despite all this media hype and all these race baiting and stuff, it's just the facts in the court, thank God. And anyway, that happened in Florida in 2012. I just want to point that out because the comparison in the Family Guy episode is just not fair. Here, Peter just shoots a guy in the dark and it happens to be a kid. It's not that innocent with George Zimmerman. Anyway, what later on happens is at the hospital, Peter meets the Browns and finds Cleveland and Donna angered and calling him racist. Cleveland Jr. explains that he didn't hear Peter approaching due to listening to music on a headset and that he was using the window to avoid letting out too much air conditioning through the front door. Although Joe explains that the police have deemed the shooting an accident, Cleveland refuses to have anything further to do with Peter. Later on, at the Drunken Clam, Peter, Quagmire, and Joe see Cleveland at Tom Tucker's show, where he is trying to convince Quahog residents that Peter's actions were a hate crime. The town starts acting angrily towards the Griffins, so Peter sets out to prove that he isn't racist. He tries to take Cleveland to a drink and cigars, but his clumsiness results in Cleveland's house catching on fire, and as a crowd gathers, Peter's screams for the family to get out of the burning building house are misconstrued as threats. An angry crowd later forms outside the Griffin's house, where Joe and his fellow police officers are forced to arrest Peter on orders of his supervisor to pacify the black community. So now we're actually getting into a pretty good comparison. The beginning wasn't right there, but them just calling him racist for no reason, that's a perfect comparison to what's been happening in these cases. I mean, there's no proof of racism. It just happens to be a white person victimizing a black person. And a lot of times it seems like an accident. Like this one seems like more of an accident. I'm not sure that you could say that about Trayvon or different cases. Every case is different. But the fact that they just go to racism and they start saying it's a hate crime right away, that's where things get really realistic, and why Family Guy nailed it with this whole comparison. I mean, that's what happened in this recent incident. We talk about Minneapolis. That's why we're bringing up episodes like this from 2015. And yeah, it's the thing that there's no racism. Like they just assume racism and then they say, oh, this case was racist. Now all cops are racist. Now let's get rid of the cops. Now let's get rid of cop shows and things that are related to cops. Who knows? This episode of Family Guy could get removed one day. It's really getting that extreme. And that's why we need to push back, because this kind of censorious, misrepresenting this PC culture, it's really, really bad for things. And it's also really toxic and race baiting, and it's causing all this anger. Everyone's really upset and scared, and people are hating the cops. These protesters are hating on white people. They're hating on America. They're canceling 4th of July. I mean, it's a real mess. While incarcerated, Peter is visited by Carter, who offers his help in bailing him out, as well as providing a distraction for the community to help with his lawyer. In court, the lawyer uses lyrics from Jay-Z's Threat and Cleveland Jr.'s last name being the same as Chris Brown's to suggest that Cleveland Jr. is a criminal, despite Peter's objections. Following the trial in which Peter is found innocent, an outraged Cleveland confronts Peter and declares that their friendship is over. Okay, this part's a little iffy, but it's funny. I think it's just a joke. And, Cleveland is mad at Peter for obvious reasons. I mean, if his kid gets shot, that makes sense. It doesn't matter if it's racism or not. And then Carter Pewterschmidt is Peter's father-in-law, and he's known to be this like rich white guy. So they're kind of portraying him as like this kind of real racist, like really kind of helping another white guy, defaming a black criminal, making Cleveland Jr. out to be a criminal. That's all bad things. But this is obviously a joke. Like the way they're doing this court scene, if you actually saw it played out, it's pretty hilarious. And it's just a fun kind of side distraction. And it's not necessarily supposed to be like, oh, white people really are this racist. It's not like necessarily saying that, even though there could be some part and some verification of that. I mean, there is some truth to that. Obviously, there are racist people out there. In every race and every group, there's going to be bad apples. And I'm sure there's someone similar to Carter Peterschmidt out there. And that doesn't really matter in this case. I mean, it's bad. Like, we want everyone to be fair. But the point is, we're watching a comedic show here. We're talking about Family Guy, and we're talking about this case and related to the whole Trayvon Martin comparison. And the fact that it lined up with a lot of other things in 2015 is just super interesting, too. As the mob turns on Cleveland and his family outside their home, Peter intercedes and admits to shooting Cleveland Jr., saying he did not have anything to do with the color of his skin and he should be held accountable for his actions. As Joe once again attempts to arrest Peter, Cleveland becomes touched by Peter finally taking responsibility and falsely claims to have shot Cleveland Jr. himself, causing the crowd to flee in disinterest in black on black crime. He admits that he realizes Peter only shot Cleveland Jr. due to his stupidity, not to being racist, and finally forgives him, to which Peter apologizes to Cleveland Jr. However, Peter is left in shock after Cleveland Jr. threatens him, claims he is joking, then immediately returns to aggressive tone to suggest he may not be before happily saying bye and skipping away. Okay, great developments here. First of all, this is the point in the real greater message where we got this original joke from, and what kind of inspired me to go back to this episode. Basically, when Cleveland says that he was the shooter and he shot his own son, all the people in the crowd leave. You could see in this little image, this is a clip from the actual show that we can't play, but there's like a crowd here. You know, you got the news reporters, got Peter, and then this is where he says that, and then everyone is out. Because it's like they don't care about black on black violence. That's the point. And that's why you could really say that Family Guy was getting kind of based here. They're getting kind of spicy. And I doubt actually they would do this in the present. This was 5 years ago. And we've seen them kind of go further left, as has a lot of media. And this is a kind of joke that they would make back then. But I don't know if they would anymore. I mean, maybe, hopefully. I still want to give Family Guy a chance once in a while. They kind of let you down because most of their episodes aren't political or super relevant. Some of them are just based on dumb stuff. You know how the show is. It makes a lot of off-color jokes and random things. So really, we can only cover them once in a while. It's not like a South Park situation where I could cover every one of their episodes and we could talk about the social and political issues all day. I mean, they just are really, really deep and relevant. Maybe especially lately, the early episodes might be a little different for South Park, but for Family Guy, they've always been this way. But they do always kind of make references. And this is the good one. The media is out of town. Black on black violence is not important to them. And it really should be, because as we've talked about year after year, black on black violence is what's really threatening black people. I mean, they want to cry about a white person shooting them once in a while or a cop, but that pales in comparison to the fact that they're killing each other way more. Like, for example, in Chicago, there's murder after murder after murder around this. And another example of this is the riots and the protests. They've killed like 20 people over the last few weeks, which is far worse than what happened in the incident that sparked the whole controversy. So the fact of the matter is, like, the media and the police, they don't really care about deaths. They don't really care about black deaths. They don't care about the lives. They say Black Lives Matter, but really they just care about the race baiting. They want to race bait. So in this show, they race baited Peter against Cleveland Jr. And that was because it was a white on black and they thought they could get some attention for it. They really wanted to get ratings and views in the news. And then on top of that, the activists and the people, they used it as a pawn. You know, it's like them, it's their reason to attack white people. And that's why at the end of the day, you can really see that in truth, these people don't care about black people nearly as much as they claim. And that's kind of funny because I feel like I care a lot more. Like, I give really good poignant advice. Like, I've never been offensive towards them. Sure, I've called a lot of black people out for this or that if they're racist or saying something wrong, but I do the same for all sorts of people, like every person. No one is left untouched here. Like, I'm being a very fair and balanced channel, in my opinion. I mean, I sure have my own beliefs and my own biases. I don't deny that, though. I tell you, I say, hey, I'm a Trump supporter. Hey, I like this show. I don't like this show. This is my favorite movie. I don't like this movie. You know what's going on with me up front, and that's where we differ. That's why we're having so much fun and so much good times talking about these topics. That about wraps things up. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Leave a like to get us shared, and until next time, you guys have a great day. Let me just take a quick moment to talk to you about my second channel. I recently relaunched and revamped No Bullshit 2, and it's now called NoBS News. I'm going to be doing new videos on there almost every day on weekdays, and then weekends we're going to be doing more live streams. So make sure you guys check out that second channel. There's already say 10 or 12 more videos on there for you to check out right now. So if you want more content, search NoBS News on YouTube or click the link below this video.